join today. So first, just wanted to welcome you all once again for joining today. And this training is going to focus now that we are closer to the site. So if you're teaching at Midwest, it's about 3 weeks out. That's a really crazy reminder. When I look at the calendar, I'm like, oh, it's coming up. It's coming quickly. And then after that, Southeast will follow and Northeast. So as you're now in the throes of really thinking, okay, classroom side of things, what do I need to prepare? At this point, presentations may have already been turned in if you're teaching at Midwest. So that's kind of out of the way. And it's now okay, how do I do the classroom side of things? So the overview for today is going to be 2 parts. First, we'll hear from Zach Giglio, who is going to speak on AI and really give the opportunity of both sharing perspective of how this topic may relate to different institute courses and also giving you the chance to talk through both what questions you may have come up from attendees and how that might relate to the courses you're teaching. So we encourage you, every course will have a different incorporation of how AI might be part of that and tied in. So feel free to ask questions. This is a dialogue. This is meant for you to help as you're preparing. And then the second half, we're going to hear from several of our tenured faculty. We'll hear from Terry Smiley, Anissa Starnes, and Jeremy Arthur, and they're going to share best practices, things they've experienced from the classroom side, tips that they have for preparing and really helping with the engagement side and managing classroom. So this session as a whole will focus on the classroom management. So to kick off, we're going to hear from Zach and then Terry and Jeremy and Anissa. So Zach, I am going to turn it over to you.
Thanks very much. And I truly do love talking about this topic, and I particularly love talking about this topic in this setting and this environment for the people who are served by this awesome program. So I've prepared just to talk through some things just based on not just what I see out there in the world of implementing AI, but also through my roles and very fortunate experience of actually teaching some of the courses that we're working on, particularly the core AI course and then the elective AI course. But obviously, as AI continues to touch more and more parts of chamber and association work, we want to make sure that if there's any questions that you have, that you've heard come up, that you yourself have, that you're either worried about, concerned about, excited about, whatever it is, just please make sure that you ask along the way. You don't have to wait to some magical moment at the end of my allotted 30 minutes, which for anybody who knows me tends to never be there because I can go on and on. I also, just so you feel comfortable interrupting me, would let you know that I have 3 kids, 5 and under, and I have 5 brothers and sisters. And so I know when I'm being loved, when I'm being interrupted, because that's what the people who say they love me do to me all the time. So do not worry about interjecting or having a question. So I thought the first thing that we would do is just level set on kind of like what is AI. It's a very large term. People use it all the time. They use terms like agents and automation and all of that. And so I just like to get kind of on the same page. When I say AI, what do I mean? What are we talking about? What are most people actually really using when we talk about AI? Which is a very large umbrella term that has a lot of different things in it, and people use it for a lot of different reasons. But very simply, it is just a computer program that seeks to accomplish tasks the way a human being would accomplish tasks, but without human intervention. So any and everything that's happening now with AI, whether it's natural language processing, big data, machine learning, agentic workflows, stuff like that, is really all just to seek to achieve that goal, is to produce something that a human would do, but without human intervention. And there are some areas that obviously go, well beyond our capabilities on things like data and information and identifying trends and stuff like that. But essentially, that's what it is. Now, AI, for a lot of people, it's in, I guess, the zeitgeist since ChatGPT came about on November 30th, 2022, which I'm sure you remember the exact date as well, just like you remembered when your birthday is and when you got married and whatever else. I remember it because I fortunately get to work with my wife. Her name is Emma, and we sit at this table. She's not here now, but usually she sits right on the other side of the computer there. And we both use ChatGPT, and we looked at each other and said something that I can't say right now, but it was something of wonderment and amazement. But actually, AI has been around for a long, long time. It's been around since the 1950s as a field of computer science. It was something that people decided they wanted to study and to create. It took a circuitous path and got back to its core roots of what they intended it to be, which is what I've just described. There's some, as a little bit of a fun fact, has anybody ever heard of a guy named Alan Turing? Yeah, okay. So lots of people. Good. So Alan Turing, yeah, he's a very famous computer scientist. He was played by Benedict Cumberbatch in a movie called The Imitation Game, with a computer about the size of my house, I guess, um, called Enigma. Anyway, he created what's called the Turing test. And essentially, the Turing test is quite simple. People say, well, what defines AI? What actually is AI? What do we call AI? And he tried to simplify it, and I actually really like his test. So what he says is if a computer program produces an output, produces something, and a human reviewer cannot tell the difference, cannot judge whether or not was this produced by a human or was this produced by a computer, then that computer program can pass the Turing test, and we, according to him, can call it artificial intelligence. So at its core, that's essentially really all it is. It's obviously very sophisticated and incredible and the most advanced technology of our lifetime and all that stuff. But it's just a computer program that seeks to accomplish human tasks the way a human being would. The last thing I'll say on that side, and I'm obviously happy to answer questions, um, is what happened with ChatGPT. Like, why did this all of a sudden get into the mainstream to people who don't know how to code? Why is this actually have its own courses, let alone being now considered throughout the courses in IOM and everywhere else in every other academic institution in the world? It was because of a breakthrough in a part of the technology called natural language processing. So it might seem very normal to us now, a few years later, but actually, what's happening is we're using natural language, our English or Spanish or all these other languages, to engage with a computer program and to get it to actually do something. That is like very wild. That is an unbelievable thing that OpenAI actually had a breakthrough with. And that's what allowed ChatGPT to get released into the mainstream, and everything else has followed um, from there. So um, I don't think it's always necessary to really understand too much of the ins and outs on the technical side. Maybe in a couple instances when it comes to privacy and security or why these things hallucinate, which is lying. If you don't know what that means, is what the people who made AI, they call it hallucinations to make it sound fun and it's just on a trip or whatever. But actually it's, getting something wrong. So maybe there's some instances, but for the most part, the way that I equate using AI, and hopefully maybe this gives you some comfort if you're not sure, like you might like take really good pictures on your phone. Now, you might know how to get the lighting in, you might know where to put the subject, you might know exactly what to do with all that. You may have no idea why there's three lenses, there's a flash, what the heck is that thing, and there's a pinhole. You might know, I don't know what any of that is, but it doesn't mean that you can't actually do a really good job taking pictures on your phone. So just because you don't have that technical, and maybe you do, but if you don't have that technical expertise or knowledge of AI, that does not disqualify you at all from being able to actually use AI very well in your role. In fact, we work with a lot of companies and organizations, including chambers and associations. And this question comes up all the time. Do we need an AI expert? And I usually think the answer is no, actually. An AI expert can only go so far. What is very important is to have someone who has expertise in their domain, in their area, whether it is member retention, whether it's law, whether it's human resources, whether it's executive empowerment, whatever it is. Those people who know how to use AI are 10 times more powerful than an AI expert. And so you don't have to be, in my opinion, an expert in AI to be able to put it to use in a really powerful way in your existing area of expertise. In fact, that is the better combination than having some sort of technical ability in the world that I see. Now, if you have that technical ability, okay, sure, that's better. And you have that domain expertise, you're in really good shape. But it's just not a prerequisite these days to understand the technical sides. Just understanding how to leverage technology in your area of expertise is not only where you'll get the biggest benefits, but it's also where you'll mitigate most of the risks. Where people get in trouble is they're using AI outside of their areas of expertise. So when it hallucinates, when it does stuff wrong, it's just harder to spot because it's just not something these people are doing every day. That's why there's AI slop out there, people creating stuff that they had no business creating because they don't know how to do it, but now they think AI can do it for them, and so they're just doing it and creating it, and AI sounding like AI and all that stuff. So that's how we see it. We see AI as something that actually supports expertise, and in the hands of people who know what they're doing, like all of you, it becomes a very, very powerful magnifier. It becomes a tool, something that can be used, but not much more. It's not an easy button. It doesn't replace human judgment. I think that's pretty critical. People get really worried about losing control of their work. I understand that. So that's how we think about it. That's how I would encourage you all to think about it if that's not how you're thinking about it already. You have the wherewithal to be able to guide people on AI usage in your area without being a technical expert. I think that's very reasonable thing to do. So, looking at some, by the way, I'm not very good at checking chats. I'll try to do that. So if you have a question, again, just yell. You can throw something, at your screen and I'll see it. We're already seeing some pretty fantastic, great. We're already seeing some pretty fantastic use cases. So this idea that, is there value in using AI at a chamber or an association? We know that there is, and it's beyond time savings, right? Like one thing you have to remember, and there's studies on this now, which reflects real world experience, is like, at this point, we've trained and implemented AI for thousands of people in the country, at chambers, at associations, at companies, construction companies, all over. Not a single person has ever called us and said, "Thank you so much. Now that we know how to use AI to do all this stuff, we only have to work 4 days a week. Oh, I can play so much more golf. I get to do so much more vacation." It just hasn't happened. In fact, a Harvard study came out that showed that people using AI are working more hours. So this whole idea, I know there's people smarter than me who disagree with me, way smarter than me. I just don't see AI just making it that we don't need to work as much. In fact, most of the people that we're talking to in IOM, they're in chambers and associations. They don't have a ton of staff doing all this stuff. They're doing 2, 3, 4, 5 different disciplines in their role. They're doing social media, and that's one of the 10 things that they have to do that day. They're doing member retention and communications, and that's one of the 10 things they have to do that day. So even if AI is coming in and like magnifying their productivity, it isn't like they're going home early, right? Amanda.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So the module that I'm going to be teaching is on a future ready workforce. So certainly AI, I'm sure, is going to be a part of a lot of those conversations. As you've mentioned, some reports and some trends here. Is there anything different about how chambers and companies should be thinking about looking for talent and what they should be looking for or building in their current workforce to be more adaptable to AI environments and be able to find ways to use it to increase efficiency or outputs? Like, are the skills changing, or are some just being sort of enhanced or like used more in an environment like this? I welcome your reflections or insights on that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's a great question. And they would just be, kind of my opinions and also just kind of what I'm seeing. And there'll be people who have probably different opinions who are also, very smart and know what they're doing. So we are already seeing a change in the job market. And you can look at like job descriptions and job postings and roles that people are hiring for, where the prioritization of critical and creative problem solving, critical thinking, and interpersonal communication skills are becoming important in almost every role. Part of the reason for that is there's the expectation, and actually in some instances, a mandate that people use AI more. And when you're using AI in a role, it's really important. Like when we talk about prompting and prompt engineering, really what that is, like that can be replaced with just expertise in a role. So if I could know how to prompt, which does matter, like don't get me wrong. People used to say it didn't, now it's becoming system prompts and actually defining entire agent identity. So it's like more important than ever, not less important. But outside of that expertise, being able to feed in and utilize and leverage and then manage a bunch of like AI and, maybe I'm overstating that a little bit, but like people to navigate that, what they're finding is that being able to critically think and problem solve allows people to use AI in their area of expertise a little bit better. Those are some of the initial changes that we're seeing. We used to think a couple years ago, some people thought we would see roles like prompt engineer or AI specialist or whatever, and we're just not really seeing that. It's just not very practical. Maybe some of the larger organizations do it, but for the most part, in chambers and associations, it's just not a thing. And also because AI touches every part of every business or can, it doesn't make sense to silo it in like one, like almost like in the IT department. It's something that it's like transformational, something that everybody should know how to do on some level. So I would say like that's like what we're seeing. Now, we are also already seeing both in our experience, but in data, there's downsides. There's plenty of downsides to AI. And by the way, like I wouldn't consider myself an AI maximalist. I think there are plenty awful things about AI, many things that the whole world shares and many things that I've just come close to, like how if I use it too much in a week, I become dumb. On a Friday, I can barely even read an email because I'm just outsourcing the muscle that is my brain to another brain. And so what we're also seeing is companies starting to get smarter, organizations starting to get smarter about usage. Kind of like when social media came out, we were like, wow, we can connect with everyone. But then we realized, well, there's a downside too. So we have to like kind of mitigate and be careful about how we're using it. It's the same thing that we're seeing with AI. So some of the clients we work with, and we tell this story because we want people to do something like this, is like, even if you're an expert, like if you're a comms professional, if you're, membership director, you've done this for 20 years. Now you're going to come work for us. We don't want you to use AI for the first 6 months of your role because we want you not to just know how you do stuff, but how we do stuff in our business before you start outsourcing that to AI. We don't want to like automate that without you building that muscle in your brain first. So those are the two things. There is a new study out recently that is counterintuitive. I don't know if it's counterintuitive is the right word, but it kind of goes against what people like me thought. Which was that entry-level jobs were going to become increasingly difficult for college graduates to get because a lot of that repetitive administrative or maybe like foundational legwork can more easily be offloaded to AI. And I still think that makes sense on some level, but that's not what the data is showing. Entry-level jobs are up. All that stuff is up. College graduates are having a fine time getting jobs. So I don't know how to explain that. And maybe that's great. Maybe that's just going to continue. Yeah, AI probationary period. For real, yeah, I think it's a seriously good idea. So that is happening, is that like the jobs are still happening, like there's more, productivity is up, jobs are still up. So we're not seeing kind of like that thing in the workforce, that like hit on the workforce, at least not yet. And I guess the last thing I'll say is like real world experience is becoming more of a coming more as a premium. So like I might know how to use AI to do something, but do I know how to do it in an analog environment? Can I do it when AI breaks? Can I do it if AI goes down? Can I do it, by myself so that I command AI and AI agents to do it in a better way? So I don't know, maybe those are like four random things that like don't connect now that I've said them out loud, but that's kind of how I think about it. Nicole saying, I have the conversation with my students all the time. If you do not allow your brain to create or absorb what you're going to speak about, you will lose the soft skills to speak intelligently on the topic, on the spot, or even during presentations. You need to have the context. That is too good, what you just said, Nicole. I'm pretty sure AI wrote that. No, I'm just kidding.
Definitely not.
I'm just kidding. No, it's 100% right. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, it is my like life's purpose to get organizations, and particularly chambers, which are the most trusted business institutions in this country, and small business is I believe the backbone, like everybody else probably here, of this country, where all the opportunity is, where all the jobs are. 99% of every business in this country is small and medium-sized business. I know the chamber serves businesses of all sizes, but small business particularly rely on chambers, right? So I mean, this is like critical, but that doesn't mean it's just like, let's just only ever use AI. AI is for everything. There's no shoulding here, right? We shouldn't should everywhere, which is just because AI can do something, it doesn't mean that AI should do something. And that is per organization, but also per person at organization. And there's a lot of considerations that go into that. One of them particularly is what Nicole just said. Our muscles are brains, and they will atrophy if we don't use them. Calculators came out in the 70s. I live in South Carolina. Teachers in South Carolina, in Sumter, there's pictures from an old newspaper clipping I have somewhere in my Google Drive. Were protesting the use of calculators for a few reasons. One, they were expensive, so not everybody could afford them, and that wasn't actually an equal thing for the classroom. Number one. Number two, they said, well, if we offload things like long division and all this stuff to a calculator, our kids are going to become dumber at math. And they were right. I know I'm dumber at math than people before me, that's for sure, but I'm not going to delete my calculator on my phone. So I think there's something there, and obviously, actually, there's a lot of similarities, more than just that, to AI and calculators. So I do think it's like extremely critical. And so maybe even if that comes up, well, why do I need to do this if AI can do it? It's like you need to know how to do this. AI, first of all, breaks, goes weird, drifts, all that stuff. But in order to like really have command of even using AI, you just have to know how to do it without it. Okay. So anyway, good questions. As you can tell, there's no room at the end for questions. I can't help myself, so please keep them coming. There are lots of upsides. We already see the impact. We're already seeing like member retention going up for organizations, like associations and chambers that are using AI, real dollar sponsorships going up, selling more booths and things at events, like real stuff happening, not just saving time for the sake of it, real stuff happening. But there's a lot of, like we've talked about already, a lot of terrible things about AI, societal things, just, plenty of things that are not great. And so it's just up to all of us to kind of navigate that for our organizations and for ourselves. And the way I approach it is like, I try not to tell anybody what they should do. I just try to tell them as much as I know, as I think I know it. And then they can just make their own decisions and just apply what they already know and what their ethics are and values are. Like, do I need to disclose that AI helped me, write this thing? Well, if there's a requirement, then yeah, you definitely need to do that. Otherwise, it's not really a legal thing. It might be an ethical thing. You might feel weird about not saying that, or you might not care. I personally don't ask my accountant what calculator he used when he does my taxes, but that's my very like oversimplified version of what I think AI is. A lot of other people don't agree with that, and that's great. So the way this is all applied is very organization to organization. So I just try to say what I know and then let people make their own decisions and trust that they have good judgment. Hallucinations do happen. So, some people will say, okay, Mike's asked me a question. Let me just finish this one thought. So hallucinations happen, right? And so one, it's a probability model. So there's a couple reasons why it happens, but it's a model based on probability. It has to be wrong in order for it to improve. So even if they could reduce hallucinations 100%, they never would do that because it needs to actually get stuff wrong. The other thing is that it has to be creative. Higher temperature in the model is called. The more creative, the more wild, the better insights we get, the better it connects dots, the better it create things for us. But the more it can hallucinate. And so we're just not going to be in a world where there's no hallucinations, even though it's getting better. And so people say, well, it's going to make a mistake, so I shouldn't use it. And it depends on the class and who's asking the question, whether or not I say what I'm about to say next. But I usually say something like, we find if we can get you to leverage AI in a strong way, you can probably get it 80% accurate in every way, 80% talk like you, 80% write facts or whatever. And that my hope personally, that my error rate is only 20%. Because as a human, I definitely error at least, 1 out of 5 times on anything that I'm doing a day. That doesn't mean that we should just like, oh yeah, use AI for everything, but just putting it into context. It's not just this or that conversation. It's just a wider conversation there. Okay, so Mike said, can you explain what coding means in an AI context? It may be referenced in many different ways and circumstances and applications. So Mike, just correct, I'm going to go down a path and what I think you mean. If I'm going down the wrong path, please just tell me. So there is a term coined by Andrej Karpathy, which is one of the founders of OpenAI, which made ChatGPT, called vibe coding. So basically, it's a way to use an AI model to generate code. Is that what you mean, Mike?
Yes, and then some, because I think people also say when they're coding is what they're doing is building prompts, right? And the system for prompts. But I just wanted to see what you respond. I think the term is used like AI universally, but it means so many different things to people. And I don't know. I just wanted to see your reference on that.
Yeah, so some people use AI for strict coding work, engineering work, like building apps, building websites, building, scrapers or, different tools and whatever that can run locally on your computer, or you can host it and you can actually share it and people can do all that stuff. So there are developers or non-developers using AI for traditional coding tasks, right? But what happened actually with your question, maybe this is what you're getting to. So ChatGPT, November 30th, 2022 was AI for normal people 1.0. Claude Cowork or OpenClaw and now ChatGPT Codex, which by the way, if you're using ChatGPT, make sure it's 5.5 thinking, otherwise it's no good. But Codex and Claude Cowork, what they found out, what essentially Claude found out was we have a heck of a lot of people using our coding version of our LLM for non-traditional coding tasks. And actually, it's way more powerful. So we're going to build a version of that called Claude Cowork that is actually going to use our coding model to run a lot of the tasks in the background to accomplish things for people that actually a developer wouldn't be working on. Things like an analysis, creating membership renewal. So for instance, and we've done this with associations and chambers, you go to your growth zone or whatever your AMS is, and you either connect an API, so a door right into your AMS through Claude or through ChatGPT. You pull all the info you want out of it, and then you write highly personalized, individualized membership renewal letters. Hey, Zach, thanks for being a member. We're so glad you've sponsored the breakfast at the golf tournament. That's why you were able to see X, Y, and Z. Just by being on our website, this many people visited it. That has an AV of this or whatever it is. Next year is going to be great. But particularly for someone like you, you're going to care a lot about these 2 events that we have coming up. And doing that for 500, 600, 700, 800 members at once. That is done through code. It's called like a Python helper script. So basically it's combined. AI now in these environments, in these apps, is combining traditional LLM token usage with coding side by side. It's called like helper scripts, and then executing tasks for us at scale and with specificity in ways that we just couldn't 5 months ago. So the coding side of AI is what is allowing automation and scale to be to be available to anybody who don't even have a coding background. Now the prompt side is a little bit different. So prompting is like, yeah, we're using our natural language, but we're still conversing with a computer program. And so it actually matters how we use our language and how we structure it so that the AI or computer program can make good use out of it. Now, there was this idea a couple of years ago that the more sophisticated AI models got, the less we would have to learn how to prompt. And it never made sense to me. And it turns out that that's not true. Prompting has evolved. So one, the regular way of prompting still matters. So like prompt engineering or whatever still matters. But now what we're doing is we're getting into something called agents, which is where you essentially define like a little entity, a little thing that keeps going out to the world and accomplishing work for you. The way that agent gets its direction is something called a system prompt. So it's essentially like a prompt, but that it reads and knows before it does any other work. And actually the stakes for getting that prompt right are like 10 times higher because you're almost like instituting an identity in this little worker bee, as opposed to just having a back and forth one-on-one conversation. So I don't know hopefully, Mike, that's kind of where you were getting with that.
Well, I think it talks to the evolution of what's going on, but in my simplistic way of thinking is a prompt is interacting with AI and coding is being proactive, giving it a task. And you're sort of like, because I'm in finance, it's like we're taking the old macros in Excel and things and stuff, and we're building these out so it starts to work ahead of us. So. But I think it's a really broad universal term, right? People throwing it out all the time. They say they're coding or they're doing, but they're just trying to build repetitive tasks that are linked to each other versus just a single prompt.
Right.
So if I link 2 prompts I use a lot, then I'm coding, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, I can see. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Great question. I'm very happy to continue and answer questions. That's up to you all and to CC. I know there's other great people who I'm excited to listen to. The last thing I guess I'll leave you with, just as far as what I've prepared to at least talk about, is, and if you want, like I know, like I when I teach these classes where told them the past couple times, like I'm getting questions about, well, what about the energy use and what about the water and like all this stuff. So we could talk about that if you want. There are some interesting answers for that, and there are some answers that aren't going to comfort anybody if that's what they're looking
True.
for.
True.
So we could talk about that. But the last thing I'll just say is like there's no waiting that needs to happen. Like everything, like if your question is can AI do X, Y, and Z, the answer is yes now. Like whatever it is, the answer is yes. That doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean that like it's simple. That there's an easy button, but it could be complex. But the answer is somehow yes. And so there's no other thing that we have to wait for to happen. And we don't need a specialized AI tool for this or an AI tool for that. The foundational models, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, really with Claude and ChatGPT inside of it, and then Gemini, they can do everything we're talking about. And so the real challenge is not technology, it's about human behavior. It's about change management. It's about getting people who are very good at what they do, which is why they're in their role, to stop and actually change a little bit about how they're working or a lot about how they're working. That is a massive challenge. We see it in the data where last year, 95% of all AI pilots failed despite companies spending $30 to $40 billion. And I see it in the field every week. The challenge is not technology. The challenge is people. And so just remembering that like there's a lot of fear. In fact, the United States of any developed nation is the most pessimistic about AI in the world. And we have the lowest levels of adoption. And I get that, honestly. I get a lot of that. So I think just making sure that when people are asking you questions, like there's sometimes when people are asking me about water usage, they actually want to know about water usage. And there's sometimes what they're communicating to me is I'm scared of this and I don't want to use it. And so just kind of just making sure you don't have to have all the answers. If someone says that they figured out AI, they haven't used it. It's too big, it's too much. No one can master all of this. It's
Right.
scary, it's exciting, it's everything. So I would just, I guess the last thing, a long, very circuitous way of saying like, what I try to do the most in any AI conversation is just consider the human where they are in all of this and just appreciate and understand that this is scary and it's exciting and we don't know what the heck is going on really and what's going to happen and just being okay with that. Yeah.
Sorry, I am having some tech fun today. And I would definitely encourage if you have questions specific to your classes. I know Zach is such a good resource of how this incorporates. I want to give a chance. Does anyone have any final questions for Zach on this topic of AI and how, as you're looking at the classes you're teaching, how you have questions of what you anticipate might come up from students and attendees, or if you have anything for Zach, I invite you now to ask any questions. And also, if you think of it after, I'm sure Zach would not mind having a conversation after.
Yep.
Yeah. Amber.
I'm more interested in all the wine stuff he's got going on behind him, and we can talk AI later.
Oh,
No, that was
okay.
just really, thank you so much for all the insights there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Zach, for sharing. And then again, please feel free to reach out. You're such a good resource on this of questions and how, especially being on curriculum committee, you've been in the room where we've had these conversations of how different AI components and concepts need to be incorporated into institute classes. So definitely feel free to answer any questions. See here a comment. As a lover and hater of AI, thank you for continuing to remind why that's okay. And yeah, I love the both perspectives of it, of the good, the bad, the ugly. So thank you, Zach. And we are going to transition now to the classroom side of sharing. And Zach, you're also invited to share at the end of here when we open it up for all faculty. So now we're going to hear from Terry, then Jeremy, and Anissa on classroom management side and just different practices they have and advice they have for being in the classroom and what kind of how to manage on that side. So we are going to kick it off with Terry to share a little bit, and then we'll leave some time at the end for any other faculty on the call that would like to share and questions as well. So Terry, it's all you.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm happy to share I just kind of did some bullet points to share with y'all today of some ways that I try to get everybody engaged. So I try to make sure there's some interaction within the first 5 to 10 minutes whether that is a quick table discussion on the topic of the class, whether that's like a show of hands on a series of questions, or partner discussion. And sort of a tip, I guess, I like to use for partner discussions is turn and talk. A lot of times they're sitting beside someone they already know, but they may not know the person right behind them. So I like to use the kind of turn and talk, so they get to talk to someone that they maybe possibly don't know in the class, and have them talk and then have a few of those partner groups share back out. So that's kind of a way I get them engaged, I guess, in the beginning. I love to use group brainstorming when that is a fit. So, for example, I might have some post-it notes out and I might say, or how do you find prospects for your chamber? How do you find new member prospects? And have them write one thing per post-it note and then get them in a group and have them pick their top 3 ideas and then share those out, something like that. Or what is your biggest member retention tool? Um, Speaking of membership class specific there. Also something I do is I have picture cards, so just random pictures, and I also have Lego blocks, and so I might bring those and like mid class just to kind of break it up, get them moving around some. I might have them pick a picture card and tie that back into how they sell a membership or something fun. It really helps them think outside the box, and but still keeps it relevant to the content that has to be taught for that topic. Managing quiet rooms, their partners and the group activities really help break the silence of the room because you have them talk in smaller groups and then um, speak out about what they talked about. On dealing with someone talking too much, I actually had this in one of my classes last year. And what's really fun is watching the eye rolls of the people sitting behind them when they start and talking every single question. So I try to say things like, let's hear from someone who hasn't had a chance to talk yet. Or I might say, you have so much great information. Thank you for sharing, but we're going to have to move on to get through the content, or something like that. I try to be super nice because that's just my style, but it can be almost comical sometimes when you can see people behind them going, oh, great. So anyway, just trying to get them to move on or asking people who haven't shared yet to share. Um, I never stand behind the podium. I think that was one of the points. Make sure you bring a clicker. I don't think that IOM provides them. I'm not sure. I've never really asked. I just always bring my own because I'm not a behind the podium person. I really like sharing real life examples, and I think that that makes it more relative to the group. As far as takeaways, I always try to, at the end of my slides, have some type of QR code with just like some notes about what the presentation was about. They can scan and get a PDF, or they might scan and get a worksheet if it's membership math or something like that. I always try to have some QR code for them to scan at the end for a takeaway. Time management. So this may sound silly, but I actually run through the presentation and time myself to make sure that it works for the allotted class time because the core classes are longer than the elective classes. So making sure the content matches the time of the class and the breaks, figuring the breaks in and all of that. And then as far as the actual partner discussions in class or the group discussions, I don't know about you all, but it may seem like they've been talking in the small group for 5 minutes and it's only been 1 minute because you're just walking around or you're looking at what's coming up next. And so I like to also set my phone timer for those and tell them like you're going to have 1 minute to discuss in your partner groups or 2 minutes to discuss. Make sure everyone has a chance to discuss, and that kind of keeps them on track. And then my timer on my phone actually goes off so they know when time is up. I don't do a lot of pre-site engagement unless I'm wanting a survey or some type of assessment for them to take ahead of time. I do always send them the PowerPoint in PDF format right after the class, like maybe the week after. And I do that because I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I'm changing things the night before if I think of something new I want to add to the presentation. So it's not the one that I uploaded 2 weeks ahead of time into the hub. So I don't want to take too much time because I know that Jeremy and Anissa have great ideas too, but I'll just end by saying I think overall for me, I want each class to have a memorable experience, and I want it to be learning from each other as much as they learn from me, and then having some true tangible takeaways that they can actually implement and use when they get back to their office.
Awesome. Thank you, Terry. And any questions for Terry from what she's shared? Just to reiterate, I did drop in the comment, we do have some clickers. It's not many and it is a first come, first serve. So we do encourage you, if you think you might want one, please bring one. We can't guarantee that they will be available. And again, we don't have enough to supply for all faculty at all sites. And somehow they always grow legs and walk off. So it's always that of, we always seem to lose a couple at site. So we do encourage you to bring those. And if the room does have mic capability, you will have a lavalier, so like a lapel mic available depending on the location in the room. So if it does have capability for a mic, which most rooms that are large have some type of capability for that, typically the rooms that don't are small in nature, so don't really require it anyway. Yes, let's see. As a
I see
first time
Rick has-
faculty,
Yeah.
yeah.
Rick had a question, but I think Anissa said she has some thoughts, so we'll let her share that. If it's
Awesome.
good with you, Cece. Yeah.
Yeah. If no other questions, we will thank you, Terry, and turn it over to Jeremy to share.
Terry, I echo everything you just said. Great tips and tricks. I think not just from the teaching content, I try to approach it as that we're kind of shaping how, this profession thinks and leads and how we can apply that strategy back in our real world jobs. This audience, most of the audiences I teach through IOM are, they're practical, they're relationship driven, and they want something that they can immediately use. And so I think that's how I try to approach some of that. So obviously you've all gone through the vetting process, and we know it can be extensive, but our goal is to combine that expertise that, is the reason you're here as a faculty member with relevance of how somebody can apply this. And so I kind of always ask why this matters Monday morning. If they're going to go back, what can they immediately use in their chamber, in their association, and in their nonprofit? And so I try to tie every concept sort of back into real, association, chamber operations. Obviously, you hear me use the word chamber and association. That is key. That's in all of our materials. I try to go with the word organization, but oftentimes I use specifically chamber and association together because we do need to be cognizant. It's especially challenging at Southeast where the majority of the attendees are chamber, but also at Northeast where maybe the majority of the attendees are association folks. So I just try to be mindful of the audience and use those real examples from, the courses I teach. I always kind of ask my classes at the end, if you remember only one thing from this session, what is a takeaway? Can you give me some of your takeaways? I start every class by saying I list the roles and what is produced by the curriculum committee in terms of the bulleted points that here are the key topics. That's one of the things I love about this program is that they let faculty deliver it how they want to deliver it as long as you meet the goals established through the curriculum committee review process. And so I always ask, okay, you haven't seen this presentation. Most of them have because they've already downloaded it. But what is a takeaway you want to make sure I cover in this presentation? What is something you want to know something about? It may be a specific example or just a broad generality, but I always ask that. And I always, at the end of the class, go back. I usually write them on a flip chart. I always go back and say, okay, did we cover this? Did I answer this? Was this what you meant? Kind of like what Zach just did, clarifying Mike's question. So I think that's helpful for me. Again, if you can take, what were your takeaways from this session? It also helps me develop, if I'm asked to continue to teach, what are these attendees wanting to hear? What are they wanting, and it helps me redefine my curriculum. These are adults. And so obviously I'm a college faculty member, professor here. And so I have to remember kind of my presentation styles. These are professionals but they're at various stages of their career. They're at various stages of their position within their career. They're at various stages of position within their organization. So you've got, entry level folks and frontline folks. You've got CEOs and everything in between. And so I try to make it relatable. I tried to avoid really heavy lecture. Some of the stuff it just necessitates that, and some of your classes will kind of just need that. Look, I'm in higher ed. We're all about theory, but I don't ever try to present theory without some sort of application. Here's what this theory means. Here's how you can apply it. Kind of like what Zach just talked about. Certainly the interaction, the exercises. I'm a little bit of a deviation here. I've always heard don't overload with slides. I do overload with slides, but I also preface my conversations in the presentation beginning saying, this is a resource for you. If I just put one word on a slide, that has no relevance for you if you want to go back and reference it later. So my slides may be overly text heavy. I certainly don't read them, but I also preface by saying, this is a resource for you to take back with you. And so that's why maybe there's more information on my slide than there normally would be. Jason Eby, who's another faculty member, and I, we go back, we have a completely different approach. Jason and his presentations are fantastic, but mine are overly heavy and his are word centric. It's just a different approach, but just think about that. I always preface it because I will get knocked down on my evaluations by saying, there was a lot of information up there, but again, I don't read it, but it's meant for them to have as a resource going back. Cece knows this. I give a lot of collateral uploads in advance in addition to my presentation. So if there are samples and examples and all those kinds of things, I give those in advance. I think it's a great way. Terry said she puts them in a QR code. I dump them into the faculty file share so that, they've got access to that. Certainly reach out to me offline if you're teaching one of the courses I'm teaching with governance, strategic planning, strong chambers. I do a survey outside that I get the staff's permission in advance for strong chambers for the future, where I survey chamber execs across the country about what are their most salient issues and turn that into a data set that I present. So I think this will be the 4th year I've done that. So it's interesting in advance. And then I usually add my class members with their permission to get the survey the next year if I'm asked to teach that course again, to get them to participate. Again, I try to, focus my courses obviously for relevant information. If your organization disappeared tomorrow, what are you going to take from this class that can help you make sure that doesn't happen? I do use stories from the field. I was a chamber president for 10 years, an association president for 10 years, and have been back in higher ed for 5 or 6 now. Your credibility comes from your experience. It's your knowledge base, but it's the experiences that you've had. But I also try not to just say what happened at my particular organization. I didn't do everything right. And so I try to use some best practices. And, I think that stories oftentimes build trust. I'm from the South, and so I can tell a good story. It's not a fake story. It's a real story, but it's got meaning behind it. And then I guess just the last couple points, I try to facilitate networking intentionally, like Terry said. If you go in and you see a familiar face in the class, you're going to sit there probably. I'm trying to make a new friend, so I wouldn't sit there, but a lot of people do. And so I try to think about regional examples. I try to think about peer benchmarking. I try to think about size differentiations between organizations, small, medium, large, rural, suburban, urban, nationwide, statewide, regionally, local, all those kinds of things. Like Terry said, I call it a borrow this idea moment. It's the R&D, the research and development. It's rip off and duplicate. And so I call that the borrow this idea moment. Look, the days are very long. Institute days are very long. And so, like Terry said, I open pretty strong. I try to change up my pace throughout. I've got a lot of material to cover. But I always am going to make sure there's audience interaction, there's practical takeaways, and then just some time for Q&A. I try to minimize venting. It happens, and sometimes it's very therapeutic, but I just try to think about that as a whole. So you just have to wear a lot of hats in the classroom. Obviously, you're a professor, but I think you're a strategist, you're a coach, you're a therapist, you're a champion, and you will see that in all the questions that get asked of you. And so, you know, I will lastly say be careful about assuming that people understand what you're talking about or what an acronym is or what an organization is or, you know, whatever is. I have a problem sometimes using jargon. I'm from Alabama, if you hadn't picked up on my accent. I use jargon, I use colloquialisms, but you got to be careful with that to make sure, just trying to make sure that they're there. We're trying to teach for transformation is the way I like to look at it. We're providing a whole lot of information, but we're trying to transform the industry and keep it moving forward. And so I always ask myself, that's why I kind of say, what'd you take away from this class? If an attendee leaves that says, I can actually use this, then I feel like I've done my job. And so that's how I try to enforce it and kind of act like that way. And then I guess my last piece, and Anissa, Terry, those evaluations are helpful, but don't let them ruin your weekend. The participants always have a chance to evaluate you. It's constructive and it's good, but you're not going to resonate with everybody. Do your best. That's why you're here. You are the best. That's why you've been asked to be a faculty member here. So that's all I got.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. That is so packed. And I love how you touched on so many different points of it is a long week. I know you said that partway through. And they are long days. And I would say definitely be cognizant of where your class falls in the week structure. So if you're teaching on a Monday, that's the first day, which means, yes, there is more energy in that sense, but also it's a long day. So really pay attention to where you're teaching in the schedule of Institute as a whole. And that can be found on the grid, which everything is on the faculty resource page. Those were updated on there. So if you want to see the overall kind of flow of the week, starts on Monday 8 a.m., goes till Thursday, 8 a.m. is the last class. So really just pay attention to where you are. If you're coming back from lunch, just the mindful of what that means is people are in a little lunch coma. If you're that Thursday morning, they are coming off of graduation night. And Thursday morning, people are struggling. So just think through, what can you do? I love how Jeremy touched on leading out of the gate with a lot of energy and just starting off and switching it up. Adult learners may be the most challenging because attention spans are even more limited than perhaps an even younger audience of, students or grade school. But just think through what that means for adult learners, we do require movement and thinking through and I've seen in the classes, and I've seen this both in feedback and also going through the program, it is very helpful, the intentional kind of networking of, okay, now group off if you're in this region or, this organization size or this type. It is very helpful and nice to mix it up rather than always turn to the person next to you, because people are creatures of habit and they're often going to sit by the same people, which is great, but also there are so many people in the classroom they can learn from. So just echoing, I've seen that in feedback and be something that is very appreciated. So I will open up. Does anybody have any questions to put Jeremy in the hot seat for a minute? Any questions based on what Jeremy shared before we hand it over to Anissa?
Anissa's agreed to take all of my questions.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Anissa, then we are going to turn it over to you. And thank you, Jeremy, for sharing. So Anissa, it's all you.
And I apologize in advance. I have my speaking notes, and you'll see I've highlighted what Terry and Jeremy have already covered so that I don't have to repeat. But just a couple of notes that I had left to share that I think would maybe be helpful. Jeremy touched on the evaluations, and I'll start there because when I first started serving as faculty, I had some outstanding mentors that helped me get prepared to be a faculty member, but several of them told me from the outset, don't even read your evaluations. It's just going to upset you, or, don't take it to heart. And I would tell you to do the exact opposite, because I have always found that in reading every single evaluation, a lot of people say feedback is a gift, and whether it is somewhat of negative feedback or very positive, I can always learn something from it. And I hope I get better year after year just by hearing that feedback. So I would encourage you to read it, but you do have to have some thick skin sometimes. And you also have to realize you're going to get some, maybe even a little dings on your evaluation, and they won't be accurate. Like they will say that you didn't mention something and you did, you even had a slide on it. And it's just, take it to heart, but read through and look for the good nuggets of solid information that you can use to just keep, improving your skill. And I remember when I was a first-time faculty member, I had a little bit of an imposter syndrome that can creep in sometimes. But just remember, you've been asked to be here for a reason, and you're the expert in the room. But that does not mean you have to know everything. So just being comfortable with saying, I don't know the answer to that, but does someone else in the class have something to add to that? Because you've got smart people among the attendees as well. But just not, not being afraid to say, I don't have a solution for that, but I think I know who does, and get back to them after the class. There's nothing wrong with that. As far as managing the time, I don't ever do class intros, really. The core classes know each other. The electives, there's just not enough time. So I do ask ahead of time for the attendees to introduce themselves when they speak, say where they are, so that you can write it, so the other attendees can write it down if they need to follow up on something. If somebody shares a really good thought or idea, I may even say, and tell us where you're from again, in case we want to follow up with you. And I find that they get to know each other in the breakout sessions that you do or throughout the class. Let's see. On the peer-to-peer engagement and the breakouts, one thing I do that's helpful is before your class, knowing which classroom you're going to be in and going and checking it out ahead of time so that you know the setup of that particular room, looking outside your rooms. So if you are going to do breakouts, you'll see what is available next to that classroom. So if you do need to do breakouts, you can make some recommendations. I pay close attention to the rosters and how many are going to be in my class, and have an idea of how I'm going to break them up should I do an exercise like that. For the core classes, for those of you teaching those are really long classes. So I absolutely recommend having an exercise with a breakout. It just breaks it up a little bit and keeps them engaged. Jeremy and Terry both mentioned the long days and paying attention to the body language in the class. And if it's right after lunch, if it's been a heavy meal, paying attention and knowing that you might need to move around yourself a little bit more. But also, I always like to have 2 or 3 questions for the class in my back pocket, that if I see a sinking spell starting to happen, that I use an engagement exercise to just say, let's throw this question out. Who has something to add to this, and get the class teaching that way. Let's see what else I've got. I always start with housekeeping, setting the expectations for the class, going over the bullets that Jeremy mentioned. These are the objectives of this class, but then I do add the housekeeping, just reminding them to make sure that their comments or their situations that they're sharing don't run too long, so that we have an opportunity to get to everything and everybody. If I say it from the outset, that if somebody starts running long, we do this in my family, that if somebody just keeps on talking, we just hold up the 5. And that just means it's time to wrap it up, because we got to move on. And I just set that from the beginning. And it doesn't mean it's not important. It just means we need to keep the flow moving, that we're running out of time. And I always get back to them and say, let's set up a time for a one-on-one. Send me an email. I'd love to schedule something after to go into that a little bit deeper. But you will find people that you have to manage, that they've just got a situation back at their office and they bring it with them and they want to just take over the class, and you just have to sensitively manage that with them. Sidebar conversations. I always hit that from the outset in my housekeeping, to please keep those to a minimum. They can be so distracting. And I use a technique that I stole from someone, that if the sidebars start getting really loud, I just stop talking. And if you get quiet, they get quiet. And it is sometimes like managing a childhood classroom, because they're not used to sitting still so long. They're adults. They get fidgety. They start talking amongst themselves. So I just try to manage it. You're going to have, I always ask them that if they are hard typers and they're going to use their laptop to take notes, to please be aware how loud they're typing, because I don't know if y'all are like that, but it gets very disruptive in the classroom. So I find that just hitting it in that housekeeping kind of keeps that to a minimum as well. Let's see what else that we need to know. I always find just connecting with the students on whatever level, do share your own stories that can allow you to connect with them, that makes you human. We are peers, so speaking to your peers can sometimes be a little daunting. So they like to know that you've been in the seat and that you have had your own experiences. And that you can connect with them on those levels. But I can assure you that serving in this role, for those that are brand new to the faculty, it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever had the privilege to do. And they will feel that from you if you just kind of connect with them on a human level. And not standing behind the podium and just lecturing to them, just being part of the class and paying attention to the flow is good. But I think we've covered it all from Jeremy and Terry and their great input, and I'm happy to answer any questions, of course, as well.
Take her up on it. Ask her Jeremy's questions.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Thank you, Anissa. And just to reiterate, one thing you said really resonated of, you will have classes where there's somebody who's very chatty, and also you may have the inverse problem where no one is saying anything. And, it's really just pulling teeth to get any kind of interaction. So just be prepared. And I love that, the use of just some way to say, some people say Elmo and enough, let's move on. For some, it's the hand five. Some way of like, okay, we got to move on to the next topic, because you will have somebody who wants to tell the entire class their whole problem for the whole time. And, it's really just how to manage that gently. And, thank you for sharing that. We do need to move on. We can sidebar after. I know has been something faculty have shared is helpful in tying that up when there's somebody who's extra chatty and wants to share. But I want to give an opportunity. Does anyone have any questions for Anissa? Anissa, you're in the clear. Well, we have a couple minutes left, so I did want to just open it up to those who have taught before, or those that are teaching for the first time. Really, just time to unmute, raise your hand, and just ask any questions or share any thoughts if you're somebody who's taught before. Anything that as you've been listening, you thought, oh, I really want to make sure new faculty know this, that you found to be helpful, or a cautionary tale. Any advice you would impart, any wisdom? Yeah, Amber.
Okay, so Jeremy does this really well. He includes he allows the class to see his personality. And so don't be afraid to see, as in Jeremy's laughing, but seriously, he's so warm and easy to talk to and approachable. You don't have to be up there and be like, I'm the expert in this and this and that. Make sure that people know they can talk to you during the breaks and that you're approachable, and you're available resource. And then the last thing I'll share, CC, is It's just a personal pet peeve of mine. So as a facilitator, sometimes like other facilitators will ask a question, they're looking for an answer. And in their mind, they have the answer already set. They're like, oh, there's no wrong answers. But then you will see that they kind of shut down somebody maybe that has shared. Try not to be that facilitator. You can always say there is a preferred answer, but open to hear what your opinions are or whatever. So just kind of set the tone, because once you tell someone no or you brush them off, that could change their level of engagement in the class.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really good point. Is, you don't want to offend anybody, and how you interact, and even with somebody who's very chatty or somebody who was down, you don't want to be rude at any point. You don't want to approach that the wrong way. So thank you.
Cece, if I can go back, Rick had asked a
Yeah.
question earlier and then I jumped in and then I didn't answer it at all. But he asked the question about a pre-survey. And I actually do that on many of the classes in sending, once you get the roster, sending it out, whether it's just a 3 to 5, maybe it's a poll, a 3 to 5 question poll or a survey, and asking what is the one objective you'd like to get out of this class. And that will show you what they're really looking for. And it is a delicate dance, like Jeremy said, in using the word organization versus chamber versus association. Also looking at your rosters and knowing the breakdown of how many chambers you have, how many associations, what size they are. But I do find that asking some questions ahead of time with your roster is great feedback to help you kind of craft your message.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing up the rosters. It's a good reminder. It was asked in the chat about, where can you see those? Those are on the faculty resource page, and those are live rosters. So based off of the dates, and Karen dropped in there, the registration date closes. So for example, Midwest registration closes this Wednesday. So Wednesday, the 20th, the Midwest roster will be the finalized roster of what to expect. And I would say for the early enrollment deadlines that are listed there, that's typically when we see registration start to slow after that. So if you really want to get a sense, especially for electives, I mean, really any size class, of, more or less where will the class be by the early enrollment is pretty close. I mean, you still have registrations coming in for the 2 weeks after, but for the most part, a lot of people get in by that because there's a cost savings to register early. So that's a good benchmark of how many to potentially anticipate in the class. But then once the final registration closes, so for Midwest, that's May 20th, for Southeast, June 17th, and for Northeast, July 15th. Once those are finalized, the live rosters listed on the faculty page are finalized for your class. And definitely that's really helpful in looking at the composition of who's there, who's your audience. Thank you for bringing up the rosters. And we did
Rick
have a
and
chat.
Amanda, you ask about questions about, I welcome faculty members to sit in on my courses. I do coordinate it through the staff because there are sometimes room space constraints. And sometimes it's just, and then they also sometimes have other Board of Regent members or advisors or whatever do an audit that then they can give back to the curriculum committee and those kinds of things. In fact, I guess maybe other faculty members could do them. But yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I also posted in the chat, I'm happy to, if anybody's teaching any of the courses that I teach, going back to that, Rick, I mean, if you have a burning desire to sit in and learn about governance and strategic planning that I teach, I mean, I don't know why there's not a line out the door of people wanting to, sit in on those courses. As we,
There is, we turn them
I'd
away.
love to
We
learn
tell them it's
everything
full.
Zach knows about AI. I don't know that Zach wants to know about governance. No offense. I teach the non-sexy courses, which are good. But again, and then I share my information. I understand a lot of faculty member can't. It's either proprietary or trademarked or licensed, or again, I mentioned my good friend Jason Eby. His slide deck's probably not going to be very beneficial to you because he crafts a story around, an individual word or whatever on a page, whereas mine's going to be, way overkill. But I'm happy to share that. Again, we facilitate all of that through the staff. So CC always reaches out, or Karen, Sam, whoever. So if you got those, just FYI for me.
Trust
And thank
me,
you,
Jeremy.
Karen, for saying you love governance.
Trust me, Jeremy, working with Jason, we are polar opposites with our slide decks. And I love his, just having a photo and it just triggers the stories. But I approach it a little bit like Jeremy does. And I tell him from the outset, these are a lot of words on these slide decks, but it's so that you can use it later.
I've never had another faculty member just replicate what I do, nor have I replicated exactly what another faculty member does. We all have our different styles and different approaches.
Well, that's
but
not
don't
true,
start
Jeremy.
from scratch.
That's
Do
not
what?
true, Jeremy. One time last year, you absolutely did replicate.
Okay, now.
One time.
But I
you
love
too.
you anyway.
Do as I say,
You
not as I
too.
do. How about that? An inside
Family.
story where I did happen to use a trick of the trade that I had not planned on using, but I stole it from Anissa and I did use it. And I did get a better score than she did. Sorry.
No,
Oh my
sir,
gosh.
it was a 0.5% of
Play
a
nicely.
percent.
Children. Awesome. Well, I know we are at time, so if you do need to go, we totally understand. I did want to give it last opportunity for any questions or advice from anyone else on the call. And I really appreciate everyone joining today and the great questions. I hope this is helpful as you're preparing and now looking at just how close it is coming up.
And if
Awesome.
anybody has any after questions that come up, don't hesitate to reach out. And I think I can speak for Jeremy and Terry as well, that, if you have a thought about how you're going to teach something or just a question that comes up, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to help.
Yeah. And thank you again to our facilitators, Zach, Terry, Jeremy, and Anissa. Really appreciate you guys sharing today. And if those on the call, if you have any questions for me or for those facilitators, please let me know and we'll get you guys connected. And with that, thank you all. I hope you have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Yep.
CC.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thanks, CC.
Bye.